describe some of the work that you've done in the past for someone that hasn't seen your portfolio.
Well, I do commercial advertising, and that's, the billboards, the ads you see. That's kind of what I do. That's where I get my basic money. But I always have projects on the side that I guess you'd say, are in the interest of the humanity side of just life. I've been to over 50 countries from client work and just traveling the world and seen a lot. When the opportunity came up for me to go down to Tijuana, originally that wasn't my goal. It was to go to Oaxaca and photograph the workers and the fields and the people down in that region. So, but this person, Jordan, said, well, I'm going down to Tijuana to bring tents and clothing and whatever to the refugees. Maybe that would be a good start and a good, just a trial run.
And let me just tell you, so Jordan is someone that you sort of met through your work, and you've sort of tried to collaborate with him. He could translate or be an interpreter for you for some of the
That's
work
right.
that you'd like to do in Mexico. And so he says, hey, I'm going to do this work for my church. Do you want to come with me?
Yes. And so I never even for a second thought, oh, here's an opportunity to make a statement on this whole political, debate that's going on. I thought, wow, what a great opportunity to photograph faces and people. And so that was my goal. And we set this up 2 months ago. It wasn't when, now the government shut down, it's getting hotter and hotter every day, this debate. Now's the time to go. It was like, oh, we already set it up, and let's just, follow through with it. I knew it was a hot political topic, but I didn't have any interest in the political side of it or making a statement from the visit down there.
And maybe we just need to back up for a second. So you drive down to Tijuana and you just pick an area to sort of set up?
No,
how did you do that?
There was 3 refugee camps that we had pre-planned to go to. And so we went to one, the organizer was not there, so we had to go back later. That was right on the border. Literally the border wall is 40, 50 feet from this shelter. And at that place, there was about 80 refugees. They are housing them. They have a bed, to put them in. They have food. It's pretty rough. When you go in there, it looks like stacks of bunk beds that are very small quarters, like a hostel, only really not what a typical hostel would look like.
Sure.
And then the second one was a camp that we could not physically go. They would not let us go into the camp, but we were on the outskirts of the camp. So once the word kind of got out, the line started to grow. And so I would, and the system that I had set up, and you see the pictures, it's a really simple lighting setup, one light with a white background. You don't have much time to fiddle. So it's like, it's a pretty quick. Some of the I only did maybe like 1 exposure per person. It's not like I shot, 100 pictures of each person. It was very quick. And then we would get their name. We would get a little backstory on them, where they're from, the country. So I'll tell you, there's 2 things that struck me like a ton of bricks going down there. The first is the desperation of these people. So the question that I immediately thought about was, because I saw some parents, well, apparently they were parents with a small child. And I thought, the conditions of coming 1,000+ miles in a caravan, it's not like you're getting on a Greyhound bus and driving from, the one border to the other. And I got to thinking, why would someone subject their child to these conditions? And so that's the first thing I thought about was, wow. And so we went to the second group, or the second day was in a shelter that was in a church that was really rough. The smell of being, it was like being in a city dump. That's how bad it was. And then there was lots of kids there, and they're running around and stuff. And I just, my heart was like, how could a parent take their child across, and they must be pretty desperate. So that was my first sort of wave of being sort of hit with this, the feelings of the desperation of these people, and if you're single and you're 30 years old, that's one thing, but to bring a family or kids on this trek, that just really struck me.
Did you hear any of the stories about why they decided to come? Did anyone share those details with you?
So the people that took me around basically said that the refugees, as a general across the board reason, is they are looking for asylum, and they are on the trek with that intent, not to necessarily sneak across the border.
In this particular area,
yes.
It's interesting too. Even the words that we use to describe the situation really paint different pictures. You're using the term refugee. Some use the term asylum seekers. Some use the term migrants. Some use the term undocumented workers. Others will use the term illegal immigrants. But it's interesting to hear you, and I don't want you to change it, hear the term refugee, because that's likely how you viewed them, seeing them, and how they were described to you as well. And that gives the story another connotation that we don't use. Oftentimes the media doesn't use that term, refugee. They use the term, the caravan or the migrants. I tend not to use that term on SmartHER News. I try to take away the labels and just say the people, because the terms are so loaded, and because they paint a certain picture. And I don't. That's not any sort of critique of you, Joel. I just think it's interesting for me, even hearing you talk about it, to think about them more like refugees. And when I saw some of the different photos that you took, there are some that fit the stereotype that I'm sure are in many of our minds. Young Hispanic male. That fits the mind of like, what is the stereotype of someone that wants to come across the border? But there were several that surprised me. There was one that was a black mother with her child, another one of a black child. And are these Haitian refugees?
Haitian, yes.
And was that a large proportion, a noticeable proportion of the refugees?
So the one camp that we went to was prominently the Haitians. It was more of considered a Haitian camp of refugees. These camps are no fun, meaning that if you would look at it, you would say, I couldn't last one night sleeping in this camp. That's how rough it is. And they're living there right now in a state of limbo, right? And so they're waiting on, which is kind of an interesting thing. The children that I saw, once I started photographing the kids, they were laughing and running around, and they don't think beyond the next meal. The parents, they can see the weight of the situation on their shoulders and their eyes and their face. It's very noticeable, and it's almost like the kids are not really sure. They don't really know what's going on necessarily. At least the kids that I saw. They know it's tough, but it's like they absorb it a lot better than the adults. But these are camps. These are not, a situation where I would want to put my kids or anyone that I loved. And so it's a rough scenario. The other thing that struck me really like a ton of bricks was I met a number of people that were going down there. They're Americans that are going down there. They are bringing tents, blankets, food, clothing. And they are primarily the ones I met. This is what I'm saying. My experience of 3 days down there. They're faith-based people coming from churches that have a passion and a compassion for these people. They have left the politics out of it, and they are there to help these people. They're not there to make a statement. These are people going down a lot. They are crossing that border a lot to go down there to help these people. And it really struck me that, because
that's so interesting. It's so interesting you mentioned that, Joel, because last year I was able to talk to the historian at Ellis Island, who's one of my favorite people ever. He's so cool. And we were talking about the history of immigration in America. And it's been a question that I've had. So it's interesting that you're bringing it up about the role of charity groups, because in the past, especially when immigration was focused with states, the states were responsible for handling immigration. This is, prior to Ellis Island. The role of charity groups was really big. And in fact, when you would arrive at a place like New York, that, the authorities, as they would register you, would try to match you with a charity group that was familiar. So for me, it would have been the Italian Catholic, charity group for my grandmother. And for another, it'd be the Irish Protestant group, and they would try to specifically get you to a charity group because the government couldn't help you. They didn't want you to be a ward of the state. The federal government had no role. The charity groups were going to help you get on your feet because they were your community. And the government really worked with those charity groups because the government didn't want the responsibility or to foot the bill. And it's sort of interesting. That wasn't that long ago. What was it, like 130 years ago before, that we've moved away from that. And I've wondered what the role of the charity groups are now, because you don't hear a lot about them in the news, but maybe to your point, maybe they don't want to be part of this political debate. What would you like people to consider as they view your different photos? What would you just like them to consider, having been there and as the photographer?
I think that I am surprised by the hate that comes out of really both sides over this topic, or over some of the topics that we have politically, that I don't think people are really thinking through. And so one of the things I thought about is that when I approach someone who has a opposite political point of view that I have, is that do I have the ability to love them even though they don't agree with me? I think that's the thing I thought about. It's like, why do I have to hate someone that's on an opposite aisle of what I stand on, or opposite point of view? Why does that hate come out? And I think part of it is, and this is just an observation, and I could probably get in trouble for this, but I think that when politics becomes your religion, then you're in big trouble. And I think that's what's happened. On either side, people can get so into the politics that it becomes we have a belief system, but when it becomes being motivated by the politics of things, then you're in big trouble.
Well, it's interesting what you're saying too, is that, is there a way to have a really strong political debate and have fervent political beliefs, but also have compassion?
That's my question. Yeah.
Right? That's exactly what we were talking about a little bit earlier, about where is the role for compassion in this debate? And is there a role on compassion on both sides? And I think both sides would likely think that. Looking at your photos, do one or a few stand out to you as really,
the little girl,
significant?
The little girl with the hoodie, she's just the most precious little thing. And I got one frame of her, and I wish I had photographed her more. But there's actually a little video of me photographing the kids, and they're climbing on top of me. They're climbing on my cameras. They're pulling my lights off the stands. I mean, it was chaos. And I wish I had gotten a couple more frames of her. She just was so precious. Obviously, the mothers with their kids, that was another one. And I'd kind of thought maybe I'd hope to get maybe one or two of those pictures, but it wasn't hard to find that. When you look into their eyes, that's that statement of, it's like, wow, that's a real human being who's in desperate, times. And, so yeah, I think it's the faces that just sort of stare back at you, and you just think, what's their future? I guess that's part of the question I asked too, is what's their future?